Thank you for joining this edition of News Today, a series where we briefly discuss and analyze important news of the day. Without delay, let's explore their headlines first. States and union territories to act as per the definition of forest as laid down in the T.N. Godavarman Thirumulpad 1996 judgment, said the Supreme Court. Jal Jeevan Mission Behavioral Change Communication Strategy released. The Soil Health Card Scheme completes 9 years. Committee on Estimates presented PM Mega Integrated Textile Region and Apparel or PM Mitra Park Scheme and Revival Efforts for Sikh Textile Units or PSUs report. Financial assistance for rubber sector raised by 23% for financial year 24-25 and financial year 25-26, said the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Central Drug Standard Control Organization notified regularity guidelines for sampling of drugs, cosmetics and medical devices. Starting with the first news for the day. States and union territories to act as per the definition of forest as laid down in the T.N. Godavarman Thirumulpad 1996 judgment, said the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has passed an interim order while hearing writ petitions challenging the forest conservation by the amendment in the FCA Act 2023. This act amended the Forest Conservation Act 1980. Talking about the FCA Act 1980, it put several restrictions on the de-reservation of forests or use of forest land for non-forest purposes. Before we begin, let us first get to know about the T.N. Godavarman Thirumulpad versus Union of India case 1996. Till 1996, the concerned authorities used to apply the provisions of the Forest Conservation Act only to the forest notified under the Indian Forest Act of 1927. As per the judgment, forest covered areas are those which include all areas recorded as forest in any government and union and state record, all areas that were conformed to the dictionary meaning of forest, and lastly, the areas that are identified as forests by an expert committee of the Supreme Court. Coming back, let us discuss the key highlights of the latest Supreme Court directions. Firstly, it is to follow the dictionary meaning of forest as given in T.N. Godavarman Thirumulpad 1996 judgment. The Forest Conservation Act 2023 further placed non-recorded forests out of the purview of the Forest Conservation Act 1980, leaving large areas of the forests unprotected. It also covered the land which was declared or notified as a forest under the Indian Forest Act 1927 or other laws. The land recorded in government records held by the Revenue Department or the Forest Department of the state and union territories governments as forest as on or after 1980. Lastly, it also exempted certain types of land from the purview of the Act such as forest land up to 10 hectares. Moreover, the establishment of zoos or safaris by any government or authority should not be consented to without the final approval of the Apex Court. Lastly, the Forest Conservation Act 2023 further excluded zoos or safaris from the definition of non-forest purposes along with ecotourism facilities and silvicultural operations.
In other news, the Behavioral Change Communication Strategy for the Jal Jeevan Mission has been released. Let's start with learning about Jal Jeevan Mission. It was launched in 2019 to provide functional household tap connections to every rural household. That is Har Ghar Nal Se Jal by 2024. It is a centrally sponsored scheme under the Ministry of Jal Shakti. Its implementation has a decentralized, demand-driven and a community-managed approach. For instance, Pani Samitis or village water and sanitation committees have been established at the Gram Panchayat level. Initiatives like Aao Nadi Ko Jaane youth mobilization in Rajasthan have also been taken. Now let's see the fund sharing pattern for the scheme. 100% for union territories without a legislature, a ratio of 90:10 for northeastern states and union territories with a legislature, and a ratio of 50/50 for all other states. The objective of the proposed behavioral change communication strategy is to achieve the goal of Jal Jeevan Mission through a strategy-based 4 pillars, namely media engagement and digital strategy, advocacy and communications, community mobilization, and social and behavior change communications. Now let's take a look at how Jal Jeevan Mission is aligned with our sustainable development goals. The mission is perhaps the world's largest program to achieve SDG 6 targets ahead of time with speed and scale. as it ensures an adequate quantity of 55 litres per capital day, sustainability, affordability, quality, reliability, and lastly, equity and inclusivity. Further, let us take a note of some key achievements made. The scheme coverage has increased from 17% in 2019 to 74.23% in 2024, out of a total of 19.14 crore rural households. 6 states and 3 union territories assured 100% tap water connectivity such as Goa and Punjab, and a 9-fold increase in tap water coverage in 112 aspirational districts in comparison to 2019.
Moving on to the next news. The Soil Health Card scheme completes 9 years. Let us first start by getting to know about the scheme. The scheme was launched in 2014-15 to assist state governments to issue soil health cards. It further promotes integrated nutrient management or INM. In INM, the judicious use of chemical fertilizers including secondary and micronutrients in conjunction with organic manures and biofertilizers is done for improving soil health and its productivity. Additionally, it is a flagship program of the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers' Welfare. The scheme was further merged with the Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana Cafeteria Scheme as soil health and fertility component in 2022-23. Before we start, let us understand about the Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana. It is a centrally sponsored scheme whose objective is to ensure more inclusive and integrated development of agriculture and allied sectors. Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana has been restructured as Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana Cafeteria Scheme from 2022-23. Lastly, it merges some schemes of the Department of Agriculture and Farmers' Welfare, which includes rain-fed area development and Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana. Coming back, let us understand what is the Soil Health Card. The Soil Health Card provides soil nutrient status of his or her holding to each farmer and advises him or her on the dosage of fertilizers. It further suggests the soil amendments needed that should be applied to maintain soil health in the long run. The Soil Health Card contains the status of soil with respect to 12 parameters: micronutrients, macronutrients, secondary nutrients, and physical parameters. A farm will get the soil card once in every 3 years, and lastly, it helps in reducing the cost of production. Now let us move on and understand the implementation strategy. The strategy is implemented through the Department of Agriculture of all the state and union territory governments. It is integrated with the Geographic Information System. Lastly, in many areas, village-level soil testing labs have been set up, further benefiting the scheme.
In another news, the Committee on Estimates presented PM Mega Integrated Textile Region and Apparel PM Mitra Park Scheme and Revival Efforts for SICK Textile Units or Public Sector Undertakings report. Let us first discuss about the Indian textile sector. The textile sector is a key contributor to the country's economy with a current contribution of around 1% of GDP. It contributes to over 15% of country's total exports and employs over 45 million people. India is third largest exporter of textiles and apparel in the world and targets $250 billion in textile production and $100 billion in exports by 2030. Let's understand the current challenge faced by the textile industries. Firstly, competition from cheaper imports from countries like Bangladesh, China, and Turkey stands as a hurdle. It is also a highly fragmented industry. For instance, fabrics woven in Tamil Nadu is being processed in Gujarat and ending up in Bengaluru for garments. Problems of high input costs for power and capital, poor access to credit, and declining exports pose a great issue. Other hiccups involve a lack of modernization by textile mill owners, unskilled laborers, poor productivity, and more. Now let's look at the committee's recommendations. The first one is the framing of a comprehensive national textile policy to enhance the global competitiveness of the Indian textile industry. The report recommends preparing a time-bound action plan involving all stakeholders for resolving issues related to SICK textile units. Also, revival efforts for non-operational SICK textile undertakings should involve private investment, potentially through the establishment of PM Mitra parks. Lastly, vertical integration of powerloom sector beyond the ambit of PM Mitra parks to convert the textile industry from fragmented to integrated. Before moving on, here are some of the initiatives taken to boost the textile sector. Amended Technology Upgradation Fund Scheme for technology upgradation and modernization. Scheme for capacity building in textile sector, Samarth, to address skilled manpower requirement across textile sector.
Moving on to the next news. Financial assistance for rubber sector raised by 23% for financial year 24-25 and financial year 25-26, said the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Before we begin, let us understand about rubber and its plantations in India. India is the third largest producer and fourth largest consumer of natural rubber in the world. Rubber is mainly grown in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Tripura, Assam and Meghalaya. It is globally distributed in Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, China, Ivory Coast, Malaysia and Philippines. The natural rubber is produced from plants and is classified as a polymer. Hevea brasiliensis or rubber tree is native to Amazon region of South America. Now let us further talk about the conditions required for rubber tree plantation. Firstly, the availability of laterite soil found mostly in slope and undulated land. A tropical climate with an annual rainfall of 2000 to 4500 millimeters. The temperature should be ranged from 25 to 34 degrees Celsius with 80% relative humidity. Few initiatives have also been taken to increase the growth of rubber tree plantation. Rubber Board, which is a statutory body under the Rubber Act 1947, the Indian Natural Rubber Organization for Assisted Development Project across the Northeast, and lastly, the National Rubber Policy 2019. Moving on, let us understand about the latest financial assistance raised for the sector. The financial assistance was provided under the Sustainable and Inclusive Development of Natural Rubber Sector Scheme, which was implemented by the Rubber Board under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, which enhances the natural rubber production through expansion of planted area, accelerating rubber plantation in non-traditional regions including the Northeast, and intensifying research to evolve technologies for rubber cultivation. This financial assistance will further help in covering increased production costs and reduce import dependency. Lastly, let us understand in detail about the financial assistance scheme. Under the scheme, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry will also provide assistance during 2024-25 and 2025-26 to form 250 rubber producer societies to empower fellow planters. Also establish 3 nodal centers of National Institute of Rubber Training in Agartala, Guwahati and Nagaland to promote micro, small and medium enterprises by imparting training in product manufacture and quality control. Additionally, set up 18 group processing centers in the Northeast to further ensure quality and standardization of the rubber sheets. Lastly, develop rubber clones which are suitable for different agroclimatic regions to meet the rising demand.
In another news, Central Drug Standard Control Organization (CDSCO) notified regulatory guidelines for sampling of drugs, cosmetics and medical devices. The organization has issued new guidelines to ensure quality and efficacy of drugs and cosmetics by adopting uniform drug sampling methodology for drugs inspectors under drug regulatory authorities of state and central. Section 22 and 23 of Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940 prescribes detailed procedure for samples to be taken by drugs inspectors for routine drugs quality surveillance. Now let's look at the notification's key highlights. To establish a centralized database of outlets selling not of standard quality or spurious drugs. Each drugs inspector with consultation of controlling authority shall prepare a sampling plan on monthly and annual basis for finalizing sampling locations to cover entire jurisdiction or area under their office. Further, let's understand why there is a need for sampling of drugs, cosmetics and medical devices. Firstly, persistent concerns around quality of medicines manufactured in country to prevent events like the report of deaths in Gambia and Uzbekistan due to Indian cough syrup. Currently, there is no defined methodology for sample selection or location of sampling. Sampling was done randomly with the individual knowledge of drug inspectors. Another is the coverage gap, that is, existing sampling practices mainly target drugs from big brands in urban or suburban locations, neglecting rural and remote areas. Moving on, let's understand how the drugs are regulated in India. It is based on Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940 and Drugs and Cosmetic Rules 1945. Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940 created the Central Drug Standard Control Organization under Ministry of Health and Family Welfare to prescribe standards for ensuring safety, efficacy and quality of drugs, cosmetics, diagnostics and devices in India. Drug Controller General of India, the head of Central Drug Standard Control Organization, approves licenses for specified categories of drugs like blood and blood products, vaccine and more. In today's Place in News, we will discuss Papua New Guinea and its capital Port Moresby. Tribal violence in Papua New Guinea has caused the death of various people. Let's learn about its political boundaries. It is an island country in the southwestern Pacific Ocean, encompassing the eastern half of New Guinea, the world's second largest island, Bismarck Archipelago, Bougainville, and Buka, part of the Solomon Islands chain and other small islands. Stretches from just south of the equator to Torres Strait. In terms of geographical features, it is situated along a fault line, making earthquakes and resultant tsunamis relatively common occurrences. Main rivers are Sepik, Ramu, Fly, and Purari. Its highest peak is Mount Wilhelm.
As we conclude today's main news, let's take a look at some quick updates. In a case, the Bombay High Court observed that police has misutilized its power under the Section 41A of the CRPC or the Code of Criminal Procedure. Section 41A empowers a police officer conducting a probe to issue notices to people connected to the case, directing them to appear before him. If the person concerned complies with the notice, they shall not be arrested unless there are specific reasons which have to be recorded in writing by the police officer. The Milan 2024 is a multilateral naval exercise which is hosted by India. The NEAM Summit has been organized by collaboration with the ICAR, Central Agroforestry Research Institute. The neem tree is native to the Indian subcontinent. It is grown in arid, semi-arid, wet tropical and subtropical climates and is tolerant to high temperature up to 49 degrees Celsius. Indian National Centre for Ocean Information Services and ISRO is going to monitor and issue the operational forecast alerts of rip currents. The rip currents is a strong flow of water running from a beach back to open ocean, sea or lake. They can be as narrow as 10 or 20 feet in width, though they may be up to 10 times wider. The European Union has launched the mission Aspides to protect the Red Sea vessels from Iran-backed Houthi attacks. This mission aims to preserve freedom of navigation, provide maritime situational awareness, accompany ships and protect them from the possible multimodal attacks at the sea. The recent collapse in global price of nickel is reported to be due to the Chinese investment in Indonesian mines. Nickel is a lustrous silvery white metal which is the fifth most common element of the Earth's crust. Its melting point is 1453 degrees Celsius and additionally, the pure nickel is obtained by the reduction of its oxides or by the Mond process. United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific has released a report titled Asia and the Pacific SDG Progress Report 2024. The report highlighted that Asia-Pacific region is 32 years behind the 2030 target of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The United Nations Economic and Social Commission established as Economic Commissions for Asia and the Far East in 1947 and became SCAP in 1974. It is one of the 5 regional commissions of the United Nations. Uttar Pradesh has secured Rs 740 crore under the Pradhan Mantri Uchchatar Shiksha Abhiyan or the PM Usha scheme, which is the highest amount in the country. In light of the National Education Policy 2020, the Rashtriya Uchchatar Shiksha Abhiyan scheme has been revamped as PM Usha. It is a centrally sponsored scheme under the Ministry of Education, whose key objective is to improve the overall quality of existing state higher educational institutions. Before we go, it's time to put your knowledge to test in today's segment of Test Your Learning. Thank you for joining us. We hope you have enjoyed this edition of News Today. To get the answers to today's quiz and to download the PDF of News Today, make sure to check out the links in the description below.